Okay, we've got a lot of ground to cover, so we'll crack on with the first question. And this is in relation to prioritising and providing for pedestrians in Westminster. Now, the core strategy, that's our sister document to the City Management Plan, that states that within Westminster, the pedestrian shall be prioritised. And the question to you is, how should this priority be applied? So, any views on that? Gentleman at the back.
Simon Burkett, Knightsbridge Association. I think there are a lot of things that can be done to help pedestrians. A pavement width is one thing. For example, I know the Mayor is keen to reduce crossing times at traffic lights, but actually it's already pretty tight, and I'm reasonably fit, and you struggle with time. Shared space type schemes where they are genuinely appropriate, sort of less than 100 vehicles an hour, particularly in residential areas, and related type schemes where traffic volumes are higher. And I think 20-mile-an-hour schemes in residential areas would be a good way of getting the balance better towards pedestrians.
Can I just ask one of those points in terms of pavement widths? Is there any particular guidelines you feel we should be following?
I think it needs to be related to the volume of pedestrians. If you look down Brompton Road, for example, I know it's K&C on one side and Westminster on the other, but it's clearly not adequate.
Okay.
It's actually possibly dangerous. People end up walking outside the railings because they can't move on the pavement.
Okay, thank you.
Pascal Bates, Victoria Interchange Group. I agree with the last speaker and add something in relation to crossing streets, which is that not only is it a question of crossing time, it's a question of how complicated it is made for the pedestrian. A lot of planning for crossing, particularly of major roads, seems to depend on the assumption that pedestrians will be in limited numbers and will obey traffic signals. Whereas particularly in the centre of town, this area here, other areas by the main railway stations and in the main shopping areas, pedestrians are in unmanageable numbers and they don't obey signals, and that has to be factored in when designing the signals and the barriers. I appreciate that a lot of the roads that are most difficult to get right aren't Westminster roads, they're TfL roads. And it would be helpful if the policy could do something to try and secure better cooperation and synergy between TfL and Westminster when planning what's going to happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Ruth Bush, Councillor in Harrow Road Ward. There's been some requests, at least, for play streets, for streets to be made available for children to play in, and also for lower MPH, speed, thank you, lower speeds. So I just want to toss that into the pot because there's no reference to it in the document at the moment.
Thank you.
I'm Councillor Carolyn Keane, and I take a particular interest in disability issues, and I'm sorry I can't stay for the meeting because it's planning tonight, but I would like to make a plea that we look at our streets and routes to enable people to get from the main residential areas to shops and public services that are accessible, where the drop curbs are consistent, where we're clear of street clutter, where people can move around more freely rather than the rather hodgepodge approach that we seem to have at the moment to areas that we upgrade and areas that we don't, so that people can't logically get from the main areas that they live in to the main areas where they wish to take their kids to school or go to the post office. Thank you.
Thanks. What's right in the front?
John Zammett, South East Bayswater. Well, I agree with the core strategy that the pedestrians should be prioritised. I think the council's got to look at more ways of doing it. I mean, most streetscape schemes you see just replace pavement with light pavement, unless they're major schemes in the West End. And you see them just repaving streets exactly without looking to move the curb line. But Praed Street was an example recently where they did move the curve line, and I didn't think it would work sceptically, but they moved it half a metre or so, and it's made a huge difference to the pedestrian movement along that side of Praed Street they've done, and it hasn't seemed to have any adverse effect on traffic movements. But most of the schemes you look at that come to mind, Circus Road and others, just really use the present footprint of the road and repave it, and they're often relighting it. So the opportunity should be taken in every scheme, I think, to look at that. I've got points on other bullet points, but you're coming on to that.
Yeah, we will.
Brian Miller, Victoria Interchange Group. Looking at pedestrians, we spend a lot of time working out the horizontal separation of pedestrians and traffic. But looking ahead, in the next 25, 30 years, we should, I think, be looking at the vertical separation of pedestrians and traffic. And this is particularly true in pedestrian ways which are not involved in looking at shops, but are just sort of getting from mainline stations, underground stations, to places of work.
Thank you.
David Hart, Steer Davies Cleave. I'd be quite interested to see what views about trying to increase shared surface where appropriate between pedestrians and traffic in low traffic streets.
What's your view on that?
I think that they can be quite active in helping to promote pedestrian priority.
Does anyone want to comment upon that? Let's do it at the back.
The shared surface, the technical phrase is, I believe, for vehicles up to 100 vehicles an hour, and that works quite well because they mix quite well. For higher traffic volumes, you need to have other sorts of schemes rather than just mixing people across the surface. I think that's the only point.
Okay, thank you.
We have a very small new shared surface area in Harrow Road, and everybody has now requested that it should not be used by cars. There was although visually there was a demarcation, there was no surface texture demarcation, and the reaction of residents has been one of fear, basically. And it's a real disappointment because it was an interesting idea, but it doesn't seem to work on this limited location that we've got.
Okay, thank you. Was there a comment, Roger? There's a gentleman at the front.
Hello, Simon Bainham, Howard Walden Estates and Westminster Property Association. We've personally been involved at the estate in a number of schemes where perhaps shared services could be created, but we really haven't had the confidence to take them forward aggressively with Westminster because we felt inevitably there would be losers. If you're displacing some traffic, other people are going to be adversely affected. If you look at the big picture, there should be a benefit, but quite often people just listen to the people who are going to be adversely affected. And we just wondered maybe that there should be a more positive approach from Westminster towards shared surfaces, particularly shared surfaces where there's perhaps a no-through route so that the vehicles are limited.
Thank you very much. We'll just take one more before we move on to the next question.
Well, I think, I'm cautious of the pedestrian approach, and it'll be interesting how I think it's Exhibition Road works out and where the traffic's displaced and the movement. But in Queensway, if you had a shared surface approach, you would get all types of other problems, not only traffic displacement, but beggars in the street, people, going out with the baby, begging, they would just walk across the street. I think there's a lot of problems. And to me, when I first looked at Prince of Wales Junction, I could see it not working, and it hasn't worked, even if the marking had gone down. So I think it's cautious approach. But I think we should have an open mind about it, but proceed with some caution.
Sorry, just one more, and then we really will move on to the next question. Thanks for your comment.
Thanks. Niall Tipping from Grosvenor. We've been working quite closely with you on this particular issue for the last few years now, in particular trying to implement the GAL strategy work that we've done on the estate. So very, very happy to share that with you again, and also with our public realm handbook for the estate that we've produced. Just to add to that, though, I would say that one of the things that we can do to help prioritise the pedestrian is to look at the surface material that's used for cars and vehicles. I'm thinking in particular of sets. That's something that I think Westminster aren't as receptive to as perhaps they could be within appropriate circumstances.
Okay. Thanks for that.